Welcome to our deep dive into the Declaration of Independence. Yeah, we've got some fascinating material here. Looks like we're really trying to get to the heart of what this document is all about.
It's more than just a historical artifact, that's for sure. The
Right.
Declaration's, it continues to spark debate and inspire action even today.
We've got excerpts from a podcast episode and some articles, your own notes. Even begin with something as monumental as the Declaration of Independence.
Well, before we get to the, quill and ink part, it's important to understand the context.
Okay.
Imagine the American colonies back in the 1770s. Growing frustration with British rule, unjust taxes, no representation in Parliament.
Right.
It was a recipe for revolution.
The podcast episode you sent over mentions that the colonists even tried to reason with King George III, petitions letters, the whole 9 yards. But their grievances were just ignored.
It's like that feeling when you have a roommate who keeps leaving dirty dishes everywhere and, even after you've asked nicely a dozen times, nothing changes. Except in this case, the dirty dishes were things like the Stamp Act,
Oh, yeah.
forcing colonists to pay taxes on literally every piece of paper they used.
No wonder they were fed up. So things escalate, and this group of delegates from the colonies, the Continental Congress, they step in. It's decision time. Keep trying to patch things up with the crown, or go for the big break.
And they chose the latter. But they knew they needed more than just a simple, we're out of here. They needed a document that would clearly lay out their grievances, justify their actions to the world, and rally support for their cause. That's where the Declaration of Independence comes in.
Okay, so picture this. 5 guys tasked with putting this monumental vision into words. Talk about pressure. Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, Benjamin Franklin. Not exactly amateurs here, but were they just riffing off each other, or did they have a framework in mind?
They definitely weren't starting from scratch. One of your articles points out that Thomas Jefferson, the primary author, drew heavily from Enlightenment thinkers like John Locke. In particular, Locke's ideas about natural rights and the social contract that governments get their power from the people they govern, not from some divine right, were incredibly influential.
So it's like they took the best ideas about freedom and self-governance and distilled them into this potent declaration.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a rehash of Locke's ideas either. The Declaration adapts and refines those concepts in a uniquely American context. For example, Locke spoke of the right to life, liberty, and property. The Declaration substitutes property with the pursuit of happiness. It's a subtle but significant shift emphasizing individual fulfillment and opportunity.
That's so interesting. It shows how much thought went into crafting this document.
Absolutely. So let's delve into those principles. The Declaration isn't just soaring rhetoric. It lays out specific ideas that became the bedrock of American democracy.
Sounds like a good place to start. What exactly are these natural rights they're talking about?
It's the revolutionary idea that every human being is born with certain inherent rights simply by virtue of being human that cannot be taken away by any government. As we just mentioned, the Declaration specifically lists these as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, so these rights are universal. They apply to everyone, no matter their background, social status, or anything else. But how did that idea actually play out in the real world? I mean, we're talking about a time when slavery was still widespread in the colonies.
That's a really important point. The Declaration's assertion of universal natural rights set a powerful precedent. But its full realization would take centuries of struggle and debate. The existence of slavery alongside these lofty ideals exposes a deep tension that continues to challenge us today.
It makes you think about how these principles have been interpreted and applied or misapplied throughout history.
Right. It's not a simple or straightforward story. Consent of the governed is another key principle in the Declaration. This idea, also rooted in Locke's social contract theory, states that the power to govern comes from the people themselves, not from some king or dictator. It was a radical departure from the monarchical systems of Europe.
So instead of being subjects under a ruler, Americans were citizens with inherent rights and a say in how they were governed.
Exactly. It's like the ultimate power move. Taking back control from an oppressive ruler and saying, we the people decide how we want to be governed. Of course, defining exactly who was included in we the people would be a source of ongoing debate and struggle throughout American history.
Okay, so natural rights and consent of the governed, that's 2 down. What's the next big idea in the Declaration?
Well, the Declaration takes things a step further. It not only declares independence, but also outlines the right to revolution.
Whoa. They're basically saying, if the government messes up, the people have the right to overthrow it.
Precisely. The Declaration argues that if a government becomes destructive to the people's natural rights, they have the right to alter or abolish it and create a new one that better serves their needs. It's a bold statement, and one that has resonated throughout history, inspiring people around the world to fight for their own freedom and self-determination.
So it's not just about breaking free from a specific tyrant, it's about establishing the right of the people to hold their government accountable. That's a pretty potent idea.
It is, and it's an idea that continues to shape political discourse and action even today. Think about all the movements around the world that have drawn inspiration from the Declaration's right to revolution, from the Arab Spring to protests against authoritarian regimes.
It's incredible how this one document, born out of the specific circumstances of colonial America, has had such a lasting global impact.
It speaks to the power of ideas, doesn't it? The Declaration articulated principles that resonated with people who yearned for freedom and self-governance no matter where they lived.
Okay, so we've unpacked the philosophical heart of the Declaration, the big ideas that made it so revolutionary. But it wasn't just a philosophical exercise, right? This document had real-world consequences.
Oh, absolutely. The Declaration didn't just sit on a shelf gathering dust. It fueled a revolution.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I mean, imagine trying to unite 13 colonies, each with its own interests and concerns under a shared vision. How did the Declaration manage to do that?
Think of it as a rallying cry, a call to action. It declared to the world and to the colonists themselves that they were no longer subjects of the British Crown. They were a new nation united by a shared belief in the principles of liberty and self-government. The Declaration gave them a common purpose, something worth fighting for.
And it wasn't just about internal unity, it also played a crucial role in securing international support.
You're right. The Declaration helped win over crucial allies, most notably France, seeing an opportunity to weaken its rival Great Britain. France threw its weight behind the American cause, providing much-needed military and financial support.
Without France's intervention, it's quite possible the outcome of the Revolutionary War would have been very different. So the Declaration was a turning point not only for America, but for global politics.
Exactly. And its impact extended beyond the battlefield as well. It laid the groundwork for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, shaping the very structure and principles of the U.S. government.
So the Declaration wasn't just about winning independence, it was about creating a framework for a lasting and just government. It's like a blueprint for a society based on freedom and self-determination.
That's a great way to put it. The Declaration established a set of ideals that would continue to shape American democracy for centuries to come.
So this one document, born out of frustration and a desire for freedom, had a ripple effect that transformed a nation and influenced the course of global history.
It's really quite remarkable when you think about it.
But I'm guessing the story doesn't end there, right? We've only just scratched the surface of the Declaration's impact.
You're absolutely right. The Declaration's influence extended far beyond America's borders. It sparked movements for freedom and equality around the world, igniting revolutions, inspiring constitutions, and giving hope to those yearning for a more just and equitable society. But that's a story for part 2 of our deep dive. Welcome back to our deep dive into the Declaration of Independence.
In part 1, we really dug into the heart of this document, the context, the key principles, and how it fueled the American Revolution.
And we started to touch on how its impact went way beyond just one nation.
Right. It's like throwing a pebble into a pond and the ripples just keep spreading outward. So let's trace those ripples and explore how the Declaration of Independence became a source of inspiration for movements all over the world.
Perfect. And I think a great place to start is just across the Atlantic, in France. Remember, this is just a few years after the American Revolution, and France is going through its own period of immense upheaval.
Ah, yes. The storming of the Bastille, the cry for liberté, égalité, fraternité. It was a time of radical change and a complete reimagining of society.
Exactly. And while the French Revolution had its own complex causes, there's no denying the influence of the American example. French intellectuals and revolutionaries were deeply inspired by the ideas of natural rights, popular sovereignty, and the right to overthrow a tyrannical government.
So it wasn't just about copying the American model. It was about taking those core principles and applying them to the unique situation in France.
Precisely. One of the articles you shared highlights how figures like Marquis de Lafayette, who fought alongside the Americans during the Revolution, were instrumental in spreading those ideas back in France. They helped to shape the course of the French Revolution, arguing for a government based on the consent of the governed, rather than the absolute authority of a king.
So it's like the American Declaration provided a blueprint, not a literal one, but a philosophical one for how to challenge an oppressive regime and demand a more just and equitable society.
Exactly. And we see this reflected in the French Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen adopted in 1789. It echoes many of the principles found in the American Declaration, emphasizing natural rights, popular sovereignty, and equality before the law.
Wow, so the American Declaration wasn't just about breaking free from British rule. It was about igniting a global movement for freedom and democracy.
That's the amazing thing about ideas.
Yeah.
They can transcend borders and inspire action in the most unexpected places.
Okay, so we've seen the Declaration's influence on France. Where else did these ripples of revolution reach?
Let's shift our focus south to Latin America. In the early 19th century, much of Latin America was under Spanish colonial rule, and they were feeling the same frustrations that led to the American Revolution.
Unfair taxes, lack of representation, a distant and unresponsive ruling power. It's a familiar story, isn't it?
It is. And just as the American colonists looked to the Enlightenment for inspiration, so too did the leaders of the Latin American independence movements. Figures like Simón Bolívar, often called the Liberator, were deeply influenced by the ideas of the Declaration of Independence. They saw in it a model for how oppressed people could throw off the yoke of colonialism and forge their own destinies.
So it's like the American Declaration provided a playbook, not in a literal sense, but as a source of ideas and strategies for how to fight for freedom and self-determination.
It did, and the success of the American Revolution gave these movements hope. It showed them that it was possible to defeat a powerful empire and establish a new nation based on the principles of liberty and self-governance. One by one, countries like Venezuela, Argentina, and Mexico declared their independence from Spain, drawing inspiration from the American example.
It's mind-blowing to think that a document written by a handful of men in Philadelphia could spark revolutions across an entire continent.
It really speaks to the power of ideas to transcend time and space. The Declaration's message of freedom, self-determination, and human rights resonated deeply with people who yearned for a better future, regardless of where they lived.
And it wasn't just about replicating the specific structure of the U.S. government. It was about those core principles that the Declaration articulated, principles that continue to inspire movements for change all over the world, even today.
You're absolutely right. The Declaration isn't just a historical document. It's a living testament to the human desire for freedom, equality, and self-governance. It's a powerful reminder that these ideals are worth fighting for, no matter where you are or what challenges you face.
Okay, so we've seen how the Declaration influenced revolutions in France and Latin America, but its impact goes far beyond just those events. Didn't it also play a crucial role in inspiring other movements for social change, even within the United States?
It absolutely did. Let's shift our focus back to the U.S. for a moment and consider the abolitionist movement, the fight to end slavery. The Declaration's emphasis on natural rights, equality, and the pursuit of happiness was a powerful weapon in the hands of abolitionists.
It seems almost paradoxical, doesn't it? A nation founded on the principle of equality while simultaneously perpetuating the horrors of slavery.
It's a contradiction that has haunted America since its founding. But abolitionists like Frederick Douglass, who himself had escaped slavery, skillfully wielded the Declaration to expose this hypocrisy. They argued that the Declaration's principles demanded the full realization of equality for all people, regardless of race.
So they used the Declaration as a moral compass, a way to hold the nation accountable to its own ideals.
Precisely. They argued that the Declaration's promise of liberty and equality could not be truly fulfilled until slavery was abolished. And while the path to abolition was long and arduous, the Declaration provided a powerful moral framework for the movement.
And the fight for equality didn't stop there, right? Didn't the Declaration also play a role in the women's suffrage movement?
It absolutely did. Women suffragists like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton directly invoked the Declaration's language of equality and representation to demand the right to vote.
They pointed out that we the people should include women and that taxation without representation was just as unjust for women as it was for the colonists under British rule.
It was a brilliant strategy, using the Declaration's own logic to expose the hypocrisy of denying women the right to participate in the political process. And while it took decades of struggle and activism, the women's suffrage movement ultimately succeeded in securing the right to vote for women with the passage of the 19th Amendment in 1920.
And the Declaration's legacy continues to inspire even today. The civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s also drew strength from its principles.
That's right. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. invoked the Declaration's ideals of equality and justice to challenge segregation and demand equal rights for African Americans. King's "I Have a Dream" speech is a powerful testament to the enduring power of the Declaration's vision. He spoke of a nation where people would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, an echo of the Declaration's assertion that all men are created equal.
So even centuries after it was written, the Declaration continues to be a source of inspiration and a call to action for those fighting for a more just and equitable world.
It is. And that's why we see echoes of the Declaration in movements for LGBTQ+ rights, disability rights, economic justice, and so many other causes. It's a reminder that the pursuit of a more perfect union is an ongoing process, and that each generation must grapple with the challenge of living up to the Declaration's ideals.
It's like this document isn't just about the past, it's about the future. It sets forth a vision for a world where all people are treated with dignity and respect, where everyone has the opportunity to live a life of freedom and fulfillment. And that's a vision worth striving for.
It truly is. The Declaration of Independence is both a testament to the progress we've made and a challenge to do better, to keep pushing forward in the pursuit of a more just and equitable society.
Okay, so we've explored the global reach of the Declaration's influence, how it sparked revolutions and fueled social movements across continents and centuries. But before we move on, there's a rather uncomfortable truth we need to confront.
You're talking about the glaring contradiction at the heart of the Declaration, the fact that it was written and signed by men who owned other human beings' right.
Exactly. It's a tough pill to swallow. How can a document that so eloquently proclaims the equality of all men be reconciled with the reality of slavery?
It's a question that has haunted America since its founding. And while we can try to understand the historical context, the fact that slavery was so deeply entrenched in society at the time, it doesn't excuse the hypocrisy of the Declaration signers.
It's a stark reminder that even our most cherished documents can be flawed, that the people who wrote them were products of their time, and that progress is often messy and uneven.
You're right. It's important to acknowledge those flaws and grapple with them honestly. But that doesn't mean we should dismiss the Declaration altogether. It's a complex and multifaceted document, one that embodies both the aspirations and the shortcomings of its time.
So how do we navigate this complexity? How do we reconcile the Declaration's ideals with its contradictions? Is it even possible?
Those are some tough questions that we'll explore in the final part of our deep dive. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the Declaration of Independence. We've, journeyed through its historical context, witnessed its global impact, and even uncovered how its principles fueled social movements right here in the U.S.
And in part two, we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger, how to reconcile those lofty ideals of equality with the reality that many of the Declaration signers were, well, slaveholders.
Yeah, it's a tough topic, but one we can't shy away from. It feels like a contradiction at the very heart of the document and of America's story.
Absolutely. It forces us to grapple with some uncomfortable truths about our nation's past. How can a document that so eloquently proclaims the equality of all men be signed by people who owned other human beings?
It makes you question the sincerity of those who penned the Declaration. Were they truly committed to those ideals, or was it all just rhetoric?
It's tempting to just dismiss them as hypocrites and, relegate the Declaration to a museum as a relic of a bygone era.
Hmm.
But I think that would be a mistake.
Okay, so you're saying there's more to the story than just dismissing it as a product of its time?
Exactly. While we absolutely should acknowledge its flaws, we can also appreciate the Declaration as a testament to the evolving nature of human understanding. Think of it this way. The signers were products of their time, operating within a social and economic system that made it incredibly difficult to fully grasp the immorality of slavery.
So you're not excusing their actions, but trying to understand the historical context.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that even the most brilliant minds can be limited by the prevailing beliefs of their era. And the Declaration itself, despite its contradictions, set in motion a powerful set of ideas that would ultimately be used to challenge the very institution of slavery.
It's like this document contains both the problem and the potential solution.
That's a great way to put it. The Declaration's principles of equality and natural rights, however imperfectly applied at the time, became a rallying cry for abolitionists and civil rights activists in the centuries that followed.
So it wasn't just a statement of ideals, it was a catalyst for change.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
It provided a moral framework for those fighting for a more just and equitable society. And it reminds us that progress is rarely linear or straightforward. It's often messy and contradictory, full of setbacks and leaps forward.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do we apply these lessons to the 21st century? How do we ensure that the Declaration's ideals continue to guide us towards a more perfect union?
That's the challenge facing each generation, isn't it? We need to constantly examine our own beliefs and actions, asking ourselves whether we're truly living up to the Declaration's promise of equality and justice for all.
So it's not just about celebrating the past, but about using it to inform our present and future.
Exactly. We need to be willing to confront uncomfortable truths about our history and ourselves. We need to be vigilant in defending the rights of all people, especially those who are marginalized or oppressed.
It sounds like the Declaration isn't just a historical document. It's a living testament to the ongoing human struggle for a better world.
Beautifully said. The Declaration is a source of both inspiration and challenge, a reminder that the pursuit of liberty and equality requires constant effort and vigilance.
This deep dive has really taken us on a journey. We've explored the Declaration's origins, witnessed its global impact, and grappled with its contradictions. It's been fascinating and thought-provoking.
It has. And as we wrap up, I think it's important to leave you, our listener, with a final thought. What does the Declaration of Independence mean to you in the 21st century? How do its principles inform your understanding of citizenship responsibility and the ongoing pursuit of a more perfect union?
Those are powerful questions that each of us needs to consider. The Declaration is more than just a document. It's a call to action, a challenge to create a world that truly reflects its ideals.
And that world starts with each of us. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Declaration of Independence.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep striving for a world that truly embodies the spirit of liberty and equality.